All right, Christina, you're welcome to call the meeting to order.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. We call this meeting to order. We will start with the call to order roll call. Commission members. Vice Chair Gail Jackson.
Here.
Commissioner Jesse Breckenridge.
Present.
Commissioner Carol Curtis.
Here.
Commissioner Cal McCloy.
Present.
Commissioner David Steiner.
Present.
And Commissioner Thomas Waddell. Commissioner Thomas Waddell. City staff, Council Member Deb Harris.
I did receive an email that our council member would try to make it, although she had a conflicting meeting, but she might be a few minutes late.
Okay, thank you for that. Economic Vitality Director Heidi Hansen.
Present.
Awesome. Airport Director Brian Gall.
Present.
Airport Communications Manager Claire Harper.
Present.
ARFF Ops Manager Tim Skinner.
Tim is out of the office this week.
All right, and Recording Secretary Miss Yella Sanner.
Present.
Wonderful. Let's move on to preliminary general business, public comment, participation, and input. Items presented during the public participation input portion of the agenda cannot be acted upon by the commission. Individual members of the commission may ask questions of the public, but are prohibited by the open meeting law from discussing or considering the item among themselves until the item has been officially placed on the agenda. At this time, is there any public comment, participation, or input? All right, hearing none, let's move on to announcements, reconsiderations, changes to the agenda, and other preliminary announcements. Are there any announcements at this time? All right, hearing none. Approval of the minutes from our regular May 11th meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes? Or is there any further discussion about the minutes? Motion to approve? Commissioners?
This is Gail Jackson. I move to approve the minutes.
Thank you, Vice Chair Jackson. Do I hear a second?
Second, Carol Curtis.
Thank you, Commissioner Curtis. All those in favor, please unmute and say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. City Council updates, we'll come back to that once Council Member Harris joins us. Let's move along to the staff reports. Director Brian Gall.
Thank you, Chair Caldwell. Missy, can we move on to the next slide, please? All right, so fairly hot off the presses. This is a little bit of an earlier meeting, just fell a few days earlier in the month than we normally see. So some of these were coming in kind of at the last minute today. But you can see our numbers for June were a very close match to this time last year. This is in terms of total enplanements for air carrier or American Airlines. So that's a positive sign given that we have one fewer carrier than we did last year. So that's a trend going in the right direction. I attribute some of that to just the general busyness we've seen. I think we've seen pretty good load factors on our American flights lately. They're not in the position to offer as many flights daily as we would like. We're seeing somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 flights a day as our average which is fewer than we had this time last year. So that shows that people are filling those seats, that we still have the demand from our passengers for those flights that we do have. Next slide, please. So total operations tracking very closely with what we had this time last year, and an increase from what we had last month. Orville can maybe add on this when we get to his section, but I think a lot of that what we're seeing is events coming up for the summer, plus better flying weather for our general aviation tenants. It's probably increasing the number of operations we've seen. It's been pretty good flying conditions for the last month or so. Next slide, please. And that's it for our general updates. So anybody has any questions on employments or operations, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, thank you very much, Director Gall. I don't hear any questions for you at this time. Let's move on to the fixed-based operator report. Mr. Wiseman.
Thank you. I would say probably one of the most newsworthy items to bring up is we received notification last week that we were awarded the DoD fuel contract for Flagstaff. I participated in that years ago, and then opted not to for various reasons. That was back around 08 or whatever, when fuel was shooting up through the ceiling, and you basically agreed to a certain into-wing or into-plane rate, and when your fuel costs triple and quadruple, and you're getting the same cents per gallon, you've cut your margin by about 75%. But you know, things have stabilized more or less. Just thinking about the long-term picture and the fact that we did lose the other carrier and lost some volume and everything, we went ahead and bid it. And I'll be totally candid. I mean, it's a matter of public record. You can actually go up and see what we bid it at. I bid it very high, and they didn't even negotiate. They awarded it to us. So I'm trying to remember if it's a 3 or 4 year contract.
Wow.
So some people probably aren't going to be happy about that, because you're probably going to see more aircraft come in here, military. In particular, fixed wing like F-18s, things like that, because they're always looking for places to go with contract fuel. It's a good thing for not only me, but for the city and the airport as well, because you know, you're getting fuel flows on all that volume, and plus a lot of them spend the night going town, hotels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's really great news. The audit went really well. It starts effective July 1, so it'll be starting just around the corner here. As Brian mentioned, you know, business has been pretty consistent lately. We're seeing a lot of high-end, you know, turbine traffic, corporate type traffic, or, you know, private flyers. Quite a bit of military lately, and that's been a lull for a while. Our fuel flow for May was still down 10% from a year ago, but all things considered, I see that as a very positive sign. Something that's going to probably help us a little bit. I mean, if you were out here right now, sorry, ramp, it's full. I mean, we're getting a little creative in our parking right now, both large and light aircraft. But the Sedona runway closed down the first of this week, and it's closed through the middle of next week. So obviously they've got to come up here if they want to come to the closest airport. So we are seeing some of that. I had mentioned, I think at the last meeting, that I had hired some NAU football players to work over the summer, and I'm happy to report, calling them the Magnificent Seven just because it's one of my favorite movies. But we have seven players all online. We actually had them all here yesterday, working the grounds and whatnot at both the facilities, getting things cleaned up. Had a big barbecue. It was kind of funny a couple days ago. And by the way, on their shirts, I did get permission from branding and NAU. The back of their shirts, on what they call the yoke, is the NAU football logo. So some of my customers are like, which one of the players? I go, just look at the back of their shirt. You can't mistake it. But we had the Cardinals flew up in their helicopter the other day with a player for some kind of event here in town, and I had like 3 of the NAU football players out there and parked them, and I introduced everybody to each other, and I have to chuckle because one of the NAU players looks at this guy and goes, "Wow, you're not very big for the NFL." It's like, Okay, well, he's in the NFL and you're not, but it was pretty funny. We all had a good chuckle. Bocanino Force is based a helicopter with us this week. It's, I think, what you call Type 3. It's the smallest of the three kind you can have. And you can thank them in part. I don't know if you know how they start some of these controlled burns, but they fly around, they shoot ping pong balls with magnesium and something else in them into the woods. And so they're out flying around, starting fires in the woods right now. They're also here to support unmanaged burns as well. So we have them down on the south end of the ramp. I don't think I actually really talked much about the Taste of Flagstaff. It was, I think it was a great success. The chamber, I guess, is wanting to have their event in our hangar on, I think, the 19th of October this year, their annual event. And I also got approached by the Flagstaff Symphony. They want to do the Sipping with the Strings in our hangar again. So that's going to be coming up sometime around Labor Day. And I guess the last thing I would talk about is we've decided, you know, with the runway closure, it'd be a good time to get some things done. So we're having our restrooms remodeled and we're going to be repainting the hangar floor, which is hard to do those kind of things when you're operating every day. So we're going to use this as an opportunity to get some things that need to be done. And other than that, I don't have anything else to report on. If you have any questions for me.
Commissioner Caldwell, this is Commissioner Curtis. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you for that information for what you do. I live in a home in Flagstaff that I think the flight plans for a lot of things, and I've been hearing a lot of helicopters, and I'm always alert to that. It's good to learn that they have been using helicopters for some of the fires they're setting to help us not totally catch on fire. But you mentioned military. Is there, and last time I think there were special forces going in. Is there any information you can give us as to why you reported an increase in military flights?
You know, it has to do with a lot of it has to do with the National Training Center, Fort Irwin, over in California. You know, we're kind of like Vector 12 is like the Route 66 in the sky. It comes all the way from the East Coast, comes across the country, it goes through here and ends up in California. When you look at the terrain, kind of, you know, north of Albuquerque and then the missile range south of Albuquerque, they all kind of funnel in and come across northern New Mexico and northern Arizona as they make their way over to Fort Irwin. You know, their only other choice is to really go south down towards El Paso. And, you know, if you're, depending on what base you're coming out of, that's not the most efficient route. So there's just apparently a lot of training going on. So we typically will see the flights going both ways. We'll see them on the way there and we'll see them on the way back. So that's in particular, as far as the military traffic goes, what most of that is about. At least as far as I know. There was some training going on over at Camp Navajo and at night. And, you know, I live just about 3 miles off the end of the runway behind Little America. So trust me, I see and hear a lot of that traffic as well. And Josh, my operations manager, lives over in Belmont, and he wasn't too terribly happy with the Blackhawks flying all night over his house, but it is what it is. So, but yeah, that's mainly, you know, if you're seeing more military rotor traffic, they're just going back and forth. And, you know, sometimes they land here. They like to spend the night here. And they spend a lot of money when they're here. They in the hotels and restaurants and whatnot. Sometimes they'll go to Sedona, you know, sometimes they'll go to Prescott. Kind of depends on weather, depends on a lot of different things. And various helicopters have various stage lengths they can fly. A Chinook can go a lot further than a Blackhawk can, and Apache's kind of in the middle. You know, if I was just to give you like a sort of a real quick, normally a Blackhawk, you're going to see about 225 gallons on uplift. If it's special forces, you'll see twice that. On Apache, it's normally about 375 gallons, and on a Chinook, it's usually about 800 gallons. unless it's special forces, and it can be upwards 1,200 gallons or more. So. We also, we have a unit out of Hawaii that comes in here quite a bit, the Marines in a Gulfstream, and they were just in here again night before last. They just come in, they land, they spend the night, and they leave. And I think we uplifted 1,800 gallons into that Gulfstream so they could go back to Hawaii. So, you know, the altitude here also, there's not a lot of airports at 7,000 feet, much less airports that have a control tower and the crash services we have. So this is a good place for them to come and train, you know, at the higher altitudes, because the air is thinner, the aircraft don't perform as well. You know, back when I first opened, we saw a lot of traffic when there was things going on in Afghanistan, because elevation in Afghanistan is very similar to elevation here. So if that, maybe that helps.
Commissioner Caldwell, thank you for this time, and Orville, wow, this is fascinating. Thank you so much. And this is, I know it's a meeting where there's just involved. Is it all right if I share with people that these military flights are here for good purpose and training? It's a benefit to our community. We're not being attacked or anything like that.
Yeah, there's nothing top secret going on around here. Maybe over at Camp Navajo, but not here. But yeah, it's just training, and it goes on, you know, everywhere. You could go down to Mesa Gateway, and typically see a lot of military aircraft at any given time going across the country. I was just down there the other night, picked my wife up from a flight. I mean, you know, some of my neighbors live a little bit in that paranoia realm, and I hear stuff, and I mean, there's just nothing to any of that. I mean, it's all good as far as I'm concerned, and you know, they respect. You gotta understand that the last thing they want to do is be a bad neighbor. So they typically they come in, you know, more than they need to in terms of altitude and stuff. I mean, those helicopters can fly nap of the earth if they want, and even at night with their night vision goggles on. But they respect the communities they're coming in and out of, and they don't want to alienate themselves with those communities. So typically it's not an issue. So.
Thank you for the information. When I hear the helicopters, I figure help is on the way. Thank you very much. Doesn't bother me at all. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you so much, Orville, for that wonderful update. And just for the record, I think you could make it in the NFL. I don't know what they're talking about. I think you'd do fine. So, yeah, you got my vote, sir. All right.
No, not me. The player said that to the NEU player said that to the Cardinals player.
Okay.
So yeah, we all had a good chuckle. Yeah.
Well, my comment still
I'll
stands.
take that anyway.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. Any other questions for Orville before we move on? All right. Thank you again, Orville. Great update. Let's move on to project and grant updates. Oh, I think we have somebody raise their hand. Vice Chair Jackson.
Hi, yes, I have a question for Brian on the enplanements.
Sure.
I'm just curious how many flights are currently departing to Phoenix and to Dallas each day? Can we go back to that slide?
It varies daily. American schedule is not super consistent from one day to the next, or even 1 week to the next. But I would say on average right now, we're seeing 3 flights to Phoenix daily and 1 flight to Dallas Fort Worth. Okay.
So like the flights have been literally cut in half then, right? Did we get back to 8 flights last summer or no?
We did. We had more than that because we had United last summer. So from American, yeah, we had at least two daily
to
Dallas
Dallas
flights. Generally 6 flights to and from Phoenix, 5 to 6. A lot of that, I just had a conversation with some of our team members here at American Airlines, and a lot of it really does come down to that pilot shortage. They just don't have the crews to, put folks in those aircraft and move them here. So we are working on some things. Claire's going to give an update later on in this presentation about our upcoming trip to the Jumpstart Conference, where we speak to different airlines about trying to get some additional service here. One of those is going to be American. And one of the things we're looking at is not even necessarily more flights or new destinations with them, but potentially larger aircraft. So, if we can't get more pilots, maybe we can fit more people on the same flights. So that's very preliminary, and we don't know if that's going to work out or not, but it is something that we're going to pursue.
Love it. Thank you. And actually, I read this Wall Street Journal article this week about American Airlines. Did you guys see where they're like getting rid of like commissions and travel agents because they recognize that business travel has changed? And so what they're doing is that they recognize business travelers also travel for leisure. It was really quite an interesting article, and something that I would think we might want to keep an eye on moving forward. I'm happy to send that if you haven't seen it.
Yeah, I haven't seen that. That'd be great if you could forward that to us.
For sure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Caldwell, you're on mute.
Okay, of course I'm on mute. All right, it's Thursday. Meeting over. Um, Thank you very much, Vice Chair Jackson. And if you could maybe drop that link in the chat, I'd love to read that article. Thank you for sharing that bit of information. Are there any questions, other questions or comments before we move on? And thank you all. Great questions and comments. All right, project and grant updates. Director Gall.
Thank you, Chair Caldwell. We have a bit of a longer presentation today through the staff updates and some informational items, so I'm going to be a little bit more brief in the grant updates than some of our last ones, but we do have some exciting news to share. So for our CARES grant, that's the coronavirus relief grant. It is a 4-year grant that we've had for about 3 years now, so we have about a year left. We have those 4 projects that we previously discussed that were completed. And I've got 3 shown there as work in progress. Some of those are in various stages of design or waiting for mobilization, but we expect to have these going very soon, which is an airfield maintenance project that we just have a few items left to complete on before that's closed out. A terminal maintenance project that's going to be making some repairs and improvements within the terminal, including to our airline offices and TSA office, plus things like the roof, some flat roof repairs. And then a fire sprinkler replacement project that will replace the sprinkler system within the terminal building itself. On the map of current projects, it's largely the same as we've seen on previous months for the ones that are currently ongoing. But one thing you'll see, and then maybe a little bit early, but it's close enough that I wanted to put a check mark on it, that our paid parking system is very near complete, close to complete. So we'll give a little bit of an update on that later, but that's pretty exciting that we're seeing that work wrapped up. Next slide, please. So here's where we have some new updates to share. So within that CARES grant, it's been a little bit of a moving target. We have a lot of different projects in various stages of development. But I'm happy to report that I think it's 7 or 8 projects we show on here are all in various stages of procurement. So we're kind of past that stage of where we were looking into those from a preliminary level, and we're getting closer to the stage of those actually being under construction. So those are the fire sprinkler construction. I mentioned that previously. The design work is just about complete. So this is going to be the construction phase of that project. A second phase of terminal maintenance, which essentially will be the higher portions of the terminal building itself. There's some paint work that needs to be done, some drywall repairs, work on some of the beams within the building and light fixtures, things like that. Airfield maintenance phase 4. This is going to be a mix of some striping on our commercial ramp and some other updates there, plus some improvements to our current overflow lot, turning that into more of an employee lot as part of our move to a paid parking system. We also have a project that's going to be maintaining and making some repairs to our airfield perimeter fence. And another project that's going to be repaving the front section of the terminal lot, and that's the lot adjacent to the airport terminal. So now that we will have the economy lot open very shortly here, that'll give us a chance to make some upgrades and repave that terminal lot. We're also going to be doing similar work to both the rental car and employee lots on either side of the terminal. Plus, we'll be working to perform some maintenance activities on our fire station. That station's was built in 2005, so it looks pretty new, but it is approaching that age when we start to see some stuff wearing out. particularly in terms of some mechanical fixtures and the roof that needs some work to be done. So all of those are in the procurement stage now, so kind of through the negotiations, and we expect to see those projects started pretty soon here this summer. Next slide, please. Not much of an update on the snow removal equipment building this month. We did get our cultural study and our categorical exclusion request. That's some of the environmental documentation that the FAA requires. We did get both of those complete, and we'll be getting those submitted to the FAA this week for review. Other than that, design is progressing, and we're moving forward with those grant applications and hoping that we could see a construction start on that as early as this fall for at least the initial phases. Next slide, please. Okay, so the bigger one from a project update this month is our airport funded project, which is the paid parking system. So when we last met and talked about this, we still had a number of construction items to complete, but as I mentioned earlier, we're getting very close to having those done. So construction is essentially done at this point. We have a final punch list site walk scheduled for tomorrow to go through and just find a few additional items that we might need to clean up. The equipment has been installed and is being tested and calibrated. That's things like the license plate readers and the connection between the intercom system and our workstation here at the terminal. We have training scheduled next week for both airport employees plus park flag employees who are going to be helping us with enforcement. Our remaining items that need to be completed before we can turn the system on fully and start charging for parking is making sure that we have a remote customer service contract in place. That's so we have 24-hour help available. If anybody has any questions, when they push the help or intercom button on the machinery, it will go to a call center 24/7, so somebody can help them out with that. And making sure our credit card processing contracts are in place, so we have a way to accept the payment through those cards. Both of those are in their final stages, and we expect to have those in the coming weeks, with a tentative date of the parking charges starting July 1st. But we are hoping that as early as next week, we can start bringing those gate arms down and get the system into a testing phase, even with the rate set to 0. But that'll make sure that this equipment is good to go and that it's in good shape for when we do start charging. So that picture there is the dual, it's an entry and exit lane off of Kitty Hawk. That's kind of the back entrance to the economy lot. So that's as it looked as of yesterday. You can see the gate arms are up, but the equipment's all in and the bollards and the landscape's been replaced. And all we're waiting to do is make sure that it operates, and we'll be pulling those barricades and opening that lot up to the public. Next slide, please. These are some additional photos of the lanes that we recently built at the terminal lot. The photo on the left is the terminal lot entry lanes. You can see the protective bollards we built for the equipment, plus a little bit better view of the equipment and the lane status indicators. So there's those signs that say open there. Plus some of the work we've done. You can see some of the fence extensions we've done. Once you move to a paid parking system, we will see people try to find ways to avoid paying for parking. So we tried to do some perimeter and access control for those lots to make sure that people are using the lanes and not trying to go off-road as they might try to do in our landscaping. And then that picture on the right shows the exit lanes, which also shows kind of the cool view that you get now that our construction equipment is being removed and the site's cleaned up. You can see that it really looks out nicely at that coconino scroll that we've talked about previously, that art fence, which is the walk that connects the terminal to the economy lot. Next slide, please. So that's what we have for updates on airport grants and construction projects. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I do have a question, Director Gall. You had mentioned that the employee lot is being revamped. And I'm not sure, where do the employees park now? Is it in that area or?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So with the free parking, we've typically had 2 places that employees park. One is we have a small lot directly adjacent to the terminal with some assigned spaces for airport city staff, plus the management of our airline tenants and TSA and some of our other vendors that can park over there. That lot will remain largely as it is, so we are going to make some improvements to it. It's due for repaving and some updated striping. But traditionally, employees have parked in the terminal lot itself, which has been challenging, right? Because they're competing for spaces with our passengers. If they're arriving for work late or during a snowstorm, it can be hard to find a spot. And that's what's led to some of what we've seen in terms of creative parking along our driveways and lanes and things like that. It's been part of the challenge. So the lot that we've been currently using as an overflow parking lot that's adjacent to the terminal lot is going to be designated for employee parking, or the front section of that. So we've worked with our tenants to figure out how many employees they have in their worst case scenario, meaning the most shifts that overlap at the same time. So we're going to be upgrading about 75 parking spaces worth of that lot. And they will be going through a permitting system where their license plates are entered into a system. The park flag can then make sure that it is only those employees that are parking there, not regular passengers or rental cars or things like that. So that lot's going to be a dedicated employee. Is it really a section of that rental? It's an overflow and rental car lot. Once the paid parking opens, it won't be overflow parking for passengers anymore. It'll just be for rental cars and terminal employees.
And so, okay, and so I know that we were adding parking spaces, so it's not going to be a deficit to um, passengers that come in and want to park.
Yeah, correct. It's actually going to be the opposite. So the terminal lot is 385 spaces. We're going to end up losing a few of those just to some of the reconfiguration we had to do for the new lanes. So it'll be closer to 380 spaces available in that lot. But we are adding the economy lot, which is 415 spaces, which is going to more than make up for the current overflow parking we had. And unlike before, when employees had to park in the same spaces that passengers were using, now it's a totally separate area. So it'll open up more space for our passengers and hopefully more space closer to the building, so they'll have some more convenient parking options.
Wonderful. And you might have answered this in a previous meeting, but did the rental agencies gain any parking?
No,
or,
this
or any space,
change,
or any
this change
space,
won't.
not parking, but space.
Sure. So yeah, this new setup won't really affect them because the rental car companies weren't using the terminal lot
Right.
for parking. They were using the overflow lot. But what it will do is we'll reduce some competition because the overflow lot, we were allowing passengers to park there. So sometimes the rental cars had to go to the very back portion of that lot to find parking spaces for their vehicles. Now, hopefully with just employees and rental cars there, it'll be a little bit more convenient and they'll have a little bit more space to operate that equipment in, that rental equipment in.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you for that. Are there any questions for Director Gall?
Chair
Comments?
Caldwell, I had my hand raised.
Oh,
Just
yes.
so you're aware. Hi, everybody. Economic Vitality Director Heidi Hansen. I don't know, Brian, I might have missed that you might have already shared this, and if you didn't, I just want to make sure the commission knows. Brian and Claire are working on talking points for the parking lot, and so we'll get those out to you, as well as we'll be sharing those with council, so that everybody can help answer commonly asked questions about paid parking. We're already getting some paid parking questions that Brian and I have been answering. Things like an annual rate, so that people can like keep a car out there for work, and that's a no. Like, if you're gonna keep your car out there, then you're gonna pay the rates that we have. And so what we're trying to do is to share that the whole point of a paid parking program is to have a flow of traffic and to make sure that there is parking available for people when they are flying, not just at any time or given day. And we also don't want it to be used as a storage facility. So at any rate, I don't want to get into a massive amount of conversation on this, but I just wanted you to know that we promised you from the very onset of this program that we would supply you some talking points, and we will definitely have those to you before July 1st. And then the last thing, because Chair and Brian, I will have to leave this to go to the Library Commission meeting where I have to listen to a presentation. The one thing I wanted to update everybody on, in case you might have heard, BNSF had a derailment in Williams. And I just got an update from the Emergency Management Director that it was a 23-car derailment. There are no injuries. It did come very close to homes, but none of the homes have been damaged. And they were not carrying any hazardous material. It was basically, unfortunately, they were carrying cars, and they were electric cars. So they have a lot to clean up. But I just wanted for those of you that hear about it, that this is the latest and greatest news that we've gotten on that derailment. Thank you.
Wow, thank you for that update. Very much appreciated. That is very close to home, so it's good to hear that there weren't any injuries. And just I wanted to um, say to you, Heidi, before you leave for your library meeting, that I noticed on the economic vitality report that you sent out in May, that your Discover Flagstaff Instagram account had a 52% gain in new followers. That is amazing. That is a whole new demographic and a whole new group of possible travelers to Flagstaff, and to discover Flagstaff, if you will. So that's huge. So
Thank you.
congratulations. Say that
I appreciate you
before.
reading our report first off, because it's a labor of love with all the team to put that information monthly in to a nice package for all of you. So I really appreciate you doing that. And then secondly, I don't want to steal Claire's thunder, but I think you're going to be excited to hear about where her and Brian are traveling for airline meetings. And instead of me traveling this time, we are sending our Discover Flagstaff director, Trace Ward, with them to talk about the visitor portion that I normally talk about. And so what we're doing is we're broadening the scope of, well, in another way, we're cross-training more people than just, it was just me and Barney that were always traveling and working to secure service. And now we'll have Brian, Claire, Trace, myself. I really feel like we're creating a great team, a team of experts that are going to be able to tell that Flagstaff story. So part of reason I bring that up is a lot of what they do in Discover Flagstaff for social and print and digital is every time they do an ad and free of charge to the airport, they will talk and they will do a strip on the ad that says about our direct flights and our locations. And so we have continued to be a true partnership with Discover Flagstaff for our existing airline, and then we'll continue to help any new airline that decides to be a partner with us. So again, those stats are important, and I just want to let you know the airport reaps those rewards as well.
Fantastic. That's great. And I love to hear that the airport team is heading out to these meetings and helping you with your outreach and becoming experts in outreach within their own skill set. So that's fantastic. So great
Yeah,
news. Thank you.
we're in truly good hands. We have a lot more people that can help us do this, and we're in really good shape. And of course, with Brian sharing you, we're in really good shape with our director. So Brian, is there any other questions that the team might have for me before I leave? And I apologize, I'm doing double duty, but I got to head to the library meeting.
Honor, internet.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. I appreciate that feedback, and I think Claire's got some good updates for the stuff that you mentioned there in the communications section. I think you brought up some good points about some of the questions we've had about parking, and a good reminder that we are going to get those talking points out to the team beforehand. So thanks for that update. I don't think I had anything to add.
Thank you so much. I hope you enjoy your meeting. And again, I thank you, commissioners, for your volunteering to be part of our airport. Thank you. And thanks, Orville. It's exciting news on your report as well. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you, Heidi. Bye-bye. All right. Great news. All right. Any questions before we move forward? All right, let's move on to the communication and business updates. Claire Harper.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. As you are aware, we have been doing some traveling and some outreach with airlines, which has been really exciting. In May, I was in Missoula, was able to meet with a few airlines. One airline is pretty interested and we were able to make a great connection. We've also talked briefly about our passenger demand analysis, which is in progress, and we should have in the next month or two, and that will really be able to give us the data of what our catchment area is and where people are traveling within Flagstaff. So we'll certainly have a stronger case when we go and talk with airlines. And then last month on the 17th, we also submitted our small community air service development grant, and that is some matching funds to attract a new airline. And one of the things that we didn't have this year, but we've seen that other successful grant applicants have had letters from airlines. So even when we go to these conferences and we're making the connections, it's maybe perhaps in the future we could get a letter, and that would make us a stronger case for a grant. So we're certainly working on all of that. And then on Monday, we will be in Milwaukee, Monday and Tuesday for a conference. If you want to go to the next slide, Missy. So we are headed to a conference on Monday. It's called Jumpstart, and all the major airlines are there, and we get 20 minutes to speak with each airline. It's kind of a mix and match. So we put in what we were interested in. We've submitted 12 and we got 3. So we're meeting with Allegiant, which we are very excited about. In Allegiant, you can see what we would be interested in. Allegiant would be getting Denver back, which would get us to that eastern market, as well as they fly to that Southern California, which would be San Diego, Orange County, LAX, or Oakland, is what we're asking Allegiant based on what they are flying right now in Allegiant, just so you're aware. It's a low-cost carrier, but it's focused on leisure travel. So it wouldn't be every day, it would be a weekly service, but it's something that we're certainly interested in. Next slide, Missy. We'll be meeting with American as well. Something we'll be touching on with American is certainly thanking them for the service that they provide right now. Currently, American is our only provider, and that's with the flight to Dallas-Fort Worth and Phoenix. So with American, our ask is we're going to talk about a larger aircraft if they cannot provide more flights to Dallas-Fort Worth, because that's a really popular route, then if they could provide a larger aircraft. And then we're going to let them know that we really need that Denver, because if we have that Denver, Denver is kind of mid-continental, so you're able to connect over to that eastern market. So Denver would be really successful. As you know, United discontinued service in the end of October. In their last 6 months of service, they had an 88% load capacity on average. That means that 88% of the seats were filled, which were really successful. So there's certainly that need for the Denver market, and we're asking for it. Another ask for American would be that Bay Area, and they fly to Oakland, San Francisco, or San Jose, and then the Southern California, which would be LAX, Long Beach, Orange County, and San Diego. And certainly these are just what they fly to. We would never expect to have service to everything. This is just what we are interested in, what we know our community is interested in. Next slide, Missy. And then our final meeting will be with Southwest. Most everyone's familiar with Southwest, and they fly in Southern California. We would ask for San Diego, Orange County, Long Beach, and LAX. Bay Area would be the San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, and then again asking for that eastern market connection to Denver. So that's what we'll be asking for Southwest. That's all I have. I certainly have some talking points, so we'll get those to Heidi and Brian and get those out to you as soon as possible on parking. But does anyone have any questions on airline attraction?
Would these flights potentially have the Phoenix options, or is it just looking from flag to those destinations?
Flying to those destinations.
You couldn't go Allegiant flag to Mesa, the better other destinations.
Either on the base, right?
Mm-hmm.
Chair Caldwell, did you hear that question?
I didn't.
So I was just curious,
I
like
did not.
with Allegiant Air, would there be an option to go Flagstaff to Phoenix to their Mesa hub? And then I know out of Mesa, they have a ton of flights that go multiple places that might open that whole network as well, if that was an opportunity.
So there's a couple of things there. One is that Allegiant tends to fly larger aircraft. So their fleet is, for the most part, Airbus A319 to A321 series, which aren't quite as economical usually for those shorter flights that you might see with our regional jets that we see with American. The other thing is that the routes that we're asking for here, the destinations we're asking for, are in conjunction with our previous passenger demand analysis. So Claire mentioned we're getting a new one, but the passenger demand analysis we had previously was in 2015 or 2016, and it really looks at the ultimate ticket destinations of ticketed passengers. So you can see where people are actually going. One of the main complaints we get actually is people who don't like flying to Phoenix on their trips out of Flagstaff because they sort of feel like it's not really getting them towards their destination as much as they might be. And so that was kind of reflected in our last passenger demand analysis that showed that Denver area, Northern California, and Southern California were kind of 3 of our top 5 markets for where people were actually ending up. So those direct connections is what we anecdotally have been getting more for comments from customers who call us asking for places to go. So we try to tailor our immediate request to match that. But your broader question, I think we're always looking for competition in airlines. So if any of those airlines offered an additional service to somewhere closer like Phoenix, I don't think we would certainly be interested in trying to make that happen with them. But outside of American, I don't know that another carrier is going to want to come make that route because I think they feel like that they kind of like to go different places so that they're not competing with each other for the same route. Maybe they're competing for passengers that are getting left behind by another service.
Yeah, but if you take American, typically if you take American to Phoenix, you're most likely on an American flight somewhere else, right? Yeah, it's just nice. I know people who have traveled that. You go for a trip and you're able to fly back to Flag and the whole round trip circle. It's pretty nice to get off and drive a few minutes home.
Right. Very nice. Yeah. Yeah. Convenience. We're certainly going to tout our convenience at the destination, even if the cost can be a little bit higher sometimes.
Yep. Vice Chair Jackson, you had your hand up.
I did. Thank you, Chair Caldwell. I had a question regarding the Southern California routes. I get that the data that you're utilizing is from 2015. So, but I'm just curious, like, and actually all along the California coast, are we pursuing like some of the smaller airports like Santa Barbara? I see John Wayne is on there, but like Santa Rosa, Northern California, knowing that there's a pilot shortage. I'm curious what that looks like. I mean, is there a better opportunity for us to get into a smaller regional airport rather than some of the mega, like the LAXs and the San Franciscos and the international destination? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. And it's a great question. First, your initial point, when we get that updated passenger demand analysis, this could change. So we're kind of going off of slightly older data. The other thing that we're doing is we've been looking at the airlines that are, or the destinations that are served by the 3 airlines that accepted those meetings with us at this upcoming conference. So we kind of tried to look at where they're flying and what aircraft are flying there and how those aircraft would sort of mesh with the facilities we have here in Flagstaff. So some of those, Allegiant doesn't have quite as many destinations as some others, and we tried to focus on Allegiant destinations that were part of their hubs. Allegiant does kind of a point-to-point service, and their planes always end up back at one of their hubs every night. So you have a much better chance of, if you're not a hub, of having a direct service to one of their hub locations. So that's an example of how we try to pick locations that mesh with the data we have for where we have passenger demand, but then also fit the ones we would think would be more attractive to Allegiant as an operation. Same one with Southwest. Southwest doesn't have quite as many. I mean, they have a lot looking at the slide, obviously, but American has really a ton of options in California. So at some point, we just kind of had to pick. And one thing we often hear from our customers is that they want those bigger airports because of the connection options that you have for those. People aren't always going to California just to stay there. But, you know, if it's an international flight, LAX and San Francisco are great options for that kind of travel. The challenge, though, that you mentioned, Vice Mayor, is that sometimes those airports aren't as attractive for airlines for these routes. And I think LAX is a good example of that. It's a challenging place to find gate space for American. I don't think it's likely that they're going to look into adding additional routes there just because of the congestion you see at the airport. But since it is such a large operation, it does have that international connectivity. We didn't want to leave it off. And as I understand these meetings, you know, we're going to go in with this, with showing these destinations that we think would be a good fit, but it's a little bit of an open conversation and kind of a conversation starter. So if any of those airlines, especially American, because they have so many options down there, if they were to come back with another idea, we would certainly try to pursue that. But yeah, for this first go around, we tried to tailor the ones that we thought would be the most likely to fit within their current operational constraints that we're aware of from those particular airlines.
Got it. That makes sense. And I can't wait to
Yeah.
see the passenger analysis. I'm hopeful
Yeah,
that
that's
it
good.
will.
Be a good document, I think. And this update, they've got some new technology that's also going to allow us to track ground travel. You know, so if somebody drives to the LA basin rather than flying, we can show that there's that demand going from northern Arizona to that location, and that maybe at the right price and the right schedule, some of those people might fly instead. So it's going to be a little bit broader document than we've had in the past.
Yeah, I hope that we get some more cities that are connecting us east. There's a lot of West Coast cities listed on here, which is great. So hopefully that demand analysis will show that when it's completed. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Jackson. And is there an ETA on when the demand analysis will be completed?
Claire, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's we're in the process of getting that contract through procurement, and once it's in place, it's about a 2 to 3 month development time for the actual study itself.
Correct.
Yeah, so
Okay,
we'd expect to
wonderful.
see those. I would say maybe if everything goes right and we get that under contract within the next month, we're probably 3 to 4 months out on having the updated analysis in hand. So obviously we won't have it for this go around at the conference, but it'll put us well positioned for next year's if we don't find something this go around.
Okay, great. Thank you. Commissioners, any questions on the communication and business updates? Or Claire, I'm sorry, did you have anything else to add?
That's all I have. Thank you, Chair Caldwell.
Okay.
So I
and
just have an offhand, kind of an offhand
Thank-
question, Commissioner Steiner. Does anyone know
Yep.
the range of the those CRJ jets that fly out of here? Is Dallas and Denver pretty much the limit of their range?
Well, I know they can go further. I just don't think they can go further out of here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Because being at 7,000 feet with an 8,800 foot runway, they're limited in their weight. The heavier they are, the more runway they need to attain the airspeed. They need to rotate as well as stop if they have to board.
okay.
And I can just tell you, in the 25 years of being here, the two things that kill me in fuel cells is accelerate stop, is what they call second segment climb, which is after they rotate, if they lose an engine, they have to sustain a certain climb rate. And obviously, if you're starting out on a day at, say, 10,000 foot density altitude, which is what we run regularly in the summer, your single engine climb performance isn't anything like it is, you know, versus a couple 3,000 foot density. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Just curious.
Because they fly down in the rest of the continental United States at normal altitudes. They fly some of those regional flights pretty far, actually. So longer than I'd want to sit on one.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
So you can,
Right.
you can go from Mesa all the way up to like Montana, Idaho, Washington.
We've done that.
Yeah, now like,
But that's, like you said, that's just the rate, the envelope of safety.
but exactly, but when you get into the mainline jets, that all changes, all right? Because for example, we've been loading, unloading NAU as well as everybody that's played NAU for decades now. And you know, we'll put the NAU football team on. They've got a truck that hauls their gear, thank God. So that's help. But we put the team on and they can blast out here and go, you know, some of the
Chair
big
Caldwell,
Skywalker teams are.
we do
up
have to
for it.
move on to the next section due to time.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right,
But
thank you for
propane line
that.
supply,
Okay.
ways.
So in the interest of time, let's move on to the next item. And just to wrap up, were there any other questions for Claire or Director Gall for
Yes,
communications and business updates?
yes, this is Commissioner Curtis.
Yes, yes,
Yes, okay, I can
yes,
ask.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, yeah, thank you, Commissioner Caldwell. Congratulations on an excellent article about why the airport's starting to charge again. Well done. I was wondering too, does the airport provide transportation for people who ride bicycles? Flagstaff's a bicycle-friendly city. Is that an available option too? If so, is it something we should promote? That's all. Thank you.
Yeah, great question. So the airport has traditionally had bike racks, and we've expanded those recently. So as part of the construction of the new economy parking lot, that involves some improvements to the sidewalk and the addition of some bike lanes that come all the way to the terminal on the same side as the economy lot. Right now, we have, I believe it's 16 bike racks and 4 bike lockers available as on a first come, first serve basis for free. Though, to be honest, we don't see a lot of use of those. I think as people are generally traveling with bags, that can be challenging to get here on a bicycle. They're mostly used by employees at this point, but it is certainly an option, especially with e-bikes out there. If people are going on a shorter trip and want to ride their e-bike here, we have more than enough space for them. And that the layout of that, those bike racks, they're in a few different spots around the terminal, and those bike lockers are on the amenities map on our website, flagstaffaz.com. So you can find those maps there, plus a description of them in the terminal amenities page.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's move on to informational items. Off airport development, Director Gall.
Thank you, Chair Caldwell. So, we've had more interest, I think, in development around the airport with the recent council agenda items related to the Northern Arizona healthcare development across the freeway from us. This slide isn't specific to that development, but it's part of what was considered when the airport provided that. It is really several of I wanted to touch on the highlights of what how the airport is involved in development in the vicinity of the airport. What's within our what's within our purview to help regulate for those new developments, and what's outside of that, and what the federal government has to say on the same subject, because there's some overlap and some differences there. So there are 3 major topics that the city has some say in for airport related development. So I got one slide for each here. The first one is airport navigation easements. So you can see that map on the right side of your screen is the airport navigation area map. It's roughly a mile. There's some squares there that correspond with different survey limits, but it's roughly a mile from the airport perimeter. Within that mile, certain development activities trigger a requirement for a navigation easement. Those developments would be things like an annexation, zoning map amendments, subdivision plats. There's a longer list, but those are some of the major ones that we see some involvement in. And I know that the text is really small on that blue text on the left, so I don't expect everybody to read it, but that is the general navigation easement language that airport staff have developed with our partners over at the city planning team and the city attorney's office. Essentially, a navigation easement is something that gets attached to a property as an easement, just like it would for public access or for right-of-way or things like that, that essentially make sure that the owners of that property and future owners know that due to the vicinity of the airport, there are going to be potentially impacts from aircraft. So that's things like noise, potentially like vibrations or fumes or things like that from planes flying over. And that starts at 350 feet above ground level and goes on basically as high as an aircraft would want to fly. So we try to attach this to any new development within those limits shown on that map to make sure that they're aware that the airport's nearby, and that we have the right to continue overflying the airspace above that in writing. Now you'll notice the red line on that map is the city limits. So some of the airport navigation to easement is outside the city limits. So we can't enforce this in the county. And that's what we've seen with some of the developments off the end of our runways. You don't have to go very far before you're out in the county. And there are some residences there that we do hear some noise and other complaints from occasionally. So, we can advise the county on things like that, but it's really up to the county to attach those conditions in that case, which I don't believe is something that they've pursued. But so we do try to do that within city limits whenever we can. Next slide, please. The next area is height restrictions. So every airport in the country, every public airport in the country has a series of surfaces that surround it that are designed to protect different aircraft operations. So the map here is one from a previous master plan, and that's the one that's codified within city code. You can picture a majority of the surfaces around airports as a little bit of a football stadium. So you can see the one that's labeled as a horizontal surface. That's kind of the football field. And there's the conical surface, which is a 21-to-1 slope, is sort of the stands around that. There are some additional surfaces with approach and departure surfaces and things like that. But for most development, you can kind of see that in general, the further out you get from the airport, the higher those surfaces go. And really what you're trying to do is protect any objects from penetrating one of those surfaces because they could be a hazard to air navigation. So within city code, we've adopted the requirement that no structures can be built or maintained or any vegetation is supposed to grow within these surfaces. They can't enter those surfaces. So that horizontal surface is the one that impacted the hospital site in this case. It extends a certain distance from the perimeter of the runway, and it's exactly 150 feet above the designated runway elevation. Our runway elevation is roughly 7,014 feet. So you go up 150 feet from that, and that's where that surface lives. So if a property is lower than the airport, they can actually build something taller and still not enter that surface. But if they're on a higher, like if they're on a hill, they might not be able to build as tall. So it's really an elevation max by site to keep under those limits. So we did provide comments to the Northern Arizona healthcare developers to make sure they were aware of what that was. And that is one of the standards they'll be held to as they build those buildings. But that's true for other similar taller structures that might be built around the airport as well. Next slide, please. So the third and final area of city code that's directly related to the airport is the airport overlay zone. And you can see it's this kind of irregular shape in that map on the right. That shape is based on noise contours from noise studies we have done for the airport from time to time. So basically, any property that's developed within that zone should recognize that airport operations can affect the use of the property within that zone. That's mostly related to noise, but there are some other things that apply as well. This section, it's pretty detailed and pretty long. The general overview, though, is that it applies some restrictions to requirements within development based on where you're at within those noise contours. So they, for example, wouldn't want residential to be in an area that's directly within the noisier areas we would expect to see off of either end of the runway. And it also applies some requirements to developments that fall within those noise contours. So if you were to build a residential development with a little bit further away, you might have to do use some building materials that would help cancel out some of the airport noise you'd be expected to see. And so these are all done in conjunction with our partners over at the city planning department and city engineering department to try to make sure that we roll these out to any developments that trigger these zoning sections. Next slide, please. Oh, did we miss one? Yeah, there we go. So there is one more. So the three I mentioned were the ones that are written in city code. So they're the ones that we actually have authority as a city to help enforce. The big, the other big restriction that development around airports have is federal law. So the city is not directly involved in these. We generally, if we're involved in comments to other developments, we try to make sure they're aware of this requirement. But airspace through federal law is designed as exclusive right and under the sovereignty of the United States, and it's managed for public use and public transit. So really anything airspace, once they leave the runway at the airport, is under management of the Federal Aviation Administration. And so certain construction, depending on the distance from an airport and the height, triggers a notice that those people who are developing that site must let the FAA know what they're planning to build and do so in enough time that the FAA can review it before it's built so that they can provide comments back Number one, if it is provides some sort of hazard to air navigation, or number two, if maybe there's some sort of mitigating things that a developer might need to do. For example, that's why you see flashing lights on tall buildings or water towers are painted orange and white with lights on top. That's because they trigger some certain sort of mitigation due to their proximity to airports and their height above the ground. Now, the FAA is in a little bit of a unique situation where they can't actually deny a project. You know, they're not landowners and they can't deny a project from being built. But what they can do is if they issue a notice as part of this review process that a building or structure is a hazard, it makes it very hard for whoever owns that site to get funding for it because it's almost impossible to insure. So insurance companies aren't very likely to want to take on a building that the FAA has shown is going to be a hazard to air travel. And then the same thing goes for lending. It can make it challenging to get a loan or to as part of a development if they know that the FAA is not on board with the process. So the form that applicants are required to submit for projects like that is called a 7460-1. Again, I know it's really small, but I just wanted to show that it's basically a one-page form that gives an applicant a chance to type out a description of the project plus some detailed coordinates for the limits of the structure and its height above ground plus elevation. So that's what the FAA uses for review. And when that's sent out, it goes to multiple parties within the FAA. So their air traffic control group, their facilities group who manages navigation equipment, people who specialize in airspace, and many others are all part of that review process and help make that determination. So those are the four major sections, three of which are within the city's purview and one's federal that we look at for development that's near airports. In development cases like the hospital, these are the ones we refer back to provide comments to developers who are looking to build within that, so they know what kind of limitations or requirements the airport puts on projects like that. And I know there's going to be interest in more development in the vicinity of the airport. You know, the airport's city has some city-owned property that's potentially going to be built out to be some different uses, non-aviation related uses. Plus, I think as we see that hospital site develop, we'll see some, it seems likely that we'll see some additional development in the region. So I just wanted to give everybody an update on what the airport looks at and what our involvement is on those processes. And we can provide some talking points if anybody's ever interested or has questions. And if you have any other questions about what we reviewed, be happy to answer those.
Do you know if there's any current challenges with the proposed facility?
Not that we've heard. So we provided comments to the hospital really based on those three things we mentioned: the maximum height that they were allowed to build to, the forms they had to fill out through the FAA, the navigation easement, and we have not really heard any complaint from the developer on that. Obviously, they're in the earlier parts of that process, and so we'll see as they get further if it becomes a problem. We've also given the FAA a heads up that development was coming. The applicant is not to the position where they've submitted this form with the FAA yet. The biggest question I would have is if there was a potential impact to some of our navigation facilities. You know, they have they send signals out, you know, and if you had a building that blocked one of those signals, it could potentially be a problem. So we'll have to see. That's part of that review process. You know, I don't know that the proposed buildings for the hospital are too much taller than some of the tree coverage we've seen in that site, which is a bonus for them. You know, it's if you stay within the limits of the trees, you know, usually if the trees are there, structures, it's kind of a general rule. It varies by site, but so far we haven't heard of any issues. But
What about
oh, go ahead.
What about the medevac helicopters that land there? How
Yeah.
does that affect the airspace here?
So in the hospital's case, the medical flights actually have another step that I didn't include in this because it was pretty specific to the hospital case, but they have to submit another form called the 7480, which is essentially the form you would use if you were building a new airport. So the hospital itself is considered a new heliport, which is a new air traffic facility of its own. So they have to request to be, you know, considered a takeoff and landing location for those helicopters. That location is within what we call our Class D or Class Delta airspace. So that's that airspace immediately around the airport. That's, you know, kind of within the purview of our control tower. But honestly, so is the existing hospital location. So from our tower's perspective, at least speaking with them, it might be a little bit easier in that it's closer for them to see what's going on. And it's not kind of at the edge of their airspace and a challenging spot to see. It's going to be different for sure. And I think we'll see how that works as they kind of figure out what their plan is and what the approaches are going to be for that hospital location and exactly where the helipad's going to be. But that's part of that federal review process is their new heliport. So it is something that will be reviewed as that project moves forward.
Thank you. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Director Gall. Are there any questions from commissioners? All right, hearing none. Thank you again, Brian, for your report on airport development. Very much appreciated. Let's move on to action item, the meeting format. And Miss Yella, turning it over to you.
All right. So this is going off of what we discussed last meeting under our announcements. We, as airport staff, have worked with our IT department on creating a hybrid option for our meetings. This hybrid option, although can be really great, it also has kind of some disadvantages, or kind of doesn't have an advantage when people don't actually take advantage of using it. So we are asking that we vote today on two different options. One of them is to continue with our hybrid possibility, but with a minimum requirement for attendees in person. So this basically means that we'll provide the hybrid option, we'll set up the room, get all the equipment set up, but we do have a minimum requirement of commissioner attendees that are not including our city or related business staff, such as our airlines, rental cars, or Wiseman. So we would need 3 commissioners to guarantee that they would be at this meeting in order for us to go through with the hybrid setup. If we do not get those 3 in-person confirmations, then we would just be basically updating everybody, letting you all know that for this particular month, we will be providing the meeting as a virtual only, in virtual only capacity. And the second option is to kind of do away with the hybrid option for the time being, and go to a virtual only setup where there won't be any question of whether the meeting will be hybrid or virtual on any given month. It will solely be virtual. Brian, Claire, do you either of you have anything to add before we have the commissioners vote?
No, thanks, Missy. I think that was a good summary. We've actually experienced today, part of the challenge with the hybrid setup is that our display is not working quite as well as we would like it to be. So there is some challenges to having that hybrid option, especially we have had a few times in the past when we've had not a lot in the way of attendance. So we thought that maybe setting a standard for attendance on that would be helpful to make sure that it's easier for those staff members who have to kind of split their time between the hybrid option and the presentation. So if anybody has any other questions or Claire has anything to add, that'd be great.
Yes, this is Commissioner Curtis. Can I make a comment?
Sure, go ahead.
Good, thank you. As I recall, there was a meeting where we did ask people how they like to meet. Many people preferred in person. And as mentioned today, sometimes when we're going hybrid, the information is not coming through, and in person, you can be sure who's looking at you and talking to you. I think it's great to have both options, but I do think that this commission wanted to continue to have that capacity for in person, and the elements that were there when COVID was so active have ceased to be a problem anymore for meetings. So that's my thought. Is I thought commission members really did want to start meeting in person, and appreciate the other option, but I do still like connecting with colleagues face to face. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is basically a revote on that, as you mentioned, Commissioner Curtis. And that is because although many of the commissioners did request to have the hybrid option, there are very, very few who are actually taking advantage of that opportunity. And, you know, there's a decent amount of work that goes into setting up for these hybrid meetings that when we have either one to none actually attending in person, it can be a little frustrating. And so we just want to make that minimum requirement for that hybrid option. We're not necessarily taking that away, but that'll depend on today's vote. Claire, unless you have another comment beforehand, we'll go ahead and get into voting.
I'd like to make a comment, Dave Tyner. That's all right.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I've attended many of these virtually, and my virtual office is very distracting for me. And I feel like I've gained a lot more benefit out of being here in person, and probably that's how I'm planning on voting. But I just wanted to mention that the virtual office can be very distracting if and tiresome actually, and it's good to get out. So that might go along with what Claire was saying. Thank you.
Well, I'm not
All
supposed
right.
to here, but the other thing is you're on the airport commission. If you don't ever come out to the airport,
It's like, who are
I
you?
get it. I mean, yeah, some of you might fly commercially a little bit, but there's a lot more goes on at the airport than getting on
Okay.
airline.
Okay, so before we go into our open comment, I have some people that have their hands up. So Commissioner Cal McCloy, you have your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to just piggyback just a little bit on what Orville said. We went from meeting at the airport to meeting at City Hall for a while, which I thought was kind of interesting, and I wasn't too terribly fond of that. I figured that the airport commission should meet at the airport. I appreciate everything you have to do for the hybrid, and I can certainly understand the extra work. But I feel just like Orville did. If you're on the airport commission, you should probably get as familiar as you can with the airport.
Thank you for that. And Vice Chair Jackson, you have your hand up.
I do. Thanks, Chair Caldwell. I want to voice so what is the difference when I ask staff? So if 3 people show up in person, how does that change? What changes?
So the biggest difference is going to be, when everybody answers Claire on whether they will be participating in the meeting or not. We'll also, a few already do, I believe, but I'm not sure we're asking if you will be attending in person or virtual. That will be a question that will be asked. If we do not get 3 in-person confirmations by the Tuesday before the meeting, so for example, this week, that confirmation would have been by Tuesday the 6th, then we will hold that meeting still, but in a virtual only capacity. If we do get the 3 confirmations of in person, we will set up the equipment on Thursday for that hybrid option in anticipation of those 3 commissioners. So we do need kind of that confirmation for not only quorum, but for in-person or hybrid meeting. And then that will help us determine if, we kind of have enough people attending in person to make it worth it to set everything up. So it's just a little bit extra of information so that we don't set everything up. And then the day of, it's just our staff members in there with nobody else kind of a thing.
I guess my thoughts on this are that I have shown up to meetings at the airport and staff wasn't there. They had changed it to virtual. And what I see happening with this is, oh, it switched to virtual. And then now we get into confusion of having quorums. And I had all intentions of being at the airport today, but unfortunately I have a meeting downtown in 5 minutes that I can walk to. So unfortunately I couldn't make that happen. So I'm in favor of keeping hybrid, and I recognize that it's more work for staff to set up the room, and perhaps I would hate to see that the option go virtual only if there's not a set number of people. And I don't think we've even talked about what does it mean for commissioners. I mean, we're all volunteering. What does it mean for commissioners that come out to the airport for these meetings, right? So we'll now be paying for parking, is that correct?
So parking, The parking rates at the airport are, there is 1 hour free, which wouldn't quite get us through this meeting, but the airport staff can provide vouchers and can also give you access to that employee lot we mentioned. So no, we're not going to ask any commissioners or anybody coming out here for any kind of official business to pay for parking at the airport. It's really just reserved for those who are coming out here for commercial activities or for travel.
Got it. I would just really hate to see the hybrid thing go away. And I know people get sick. There's just so many things. And, you know, running an organization here, I've struggled with that as well. I think in person is the best way, but unfortunately it doesn't always work. And unfortunately things change at the last minute. And so I would like to see the hybrid stay without a minimum requirement.
I guess
Thanks.
one other concern that we didn't discuss in this is that I think you brought up a good point there, Vice Chair Jackson, that sometimes things do change, and especially with the virtual option, you know, sometimes people have connectivity issues that they weren't anticipating. But that's a problem that could impact those who do come down to the airport for an in-person meeting. You know, if we have 1 or 2 people that come to the airport and, you know, are planning on 4 people attending and 1 virtual person has trouble joining, then, you know, we're left without a quorum with a bunch of people who've made some travel as part of their day. So one of the other things we were trying to address was, you know, if we had 3 commissioners in the office, that gives us a pretty good chance, you know, if 1 person is able to join virtually, we are going to have that quorum, and it is going to be worth that trip down to the airport for those who attend. You know, it's just trying to make sure that we, that when we set it up and we have people come all the way down here, that we are going to have that meeting for folks. So open to discussion on it, but that was one of our thoughts.
Right. No, I understand that. I think that probably then raises the point that this is more of a quorum issue versus in person. So maybe the ask would be that commissioners make it a point to, in a very timely manner, let you know if we are going to be attending. Because I know that I've been guilty of you know, sending my RSVP the day of. So maybe the ask really is, commissioners, we really need you to let us know if you're going to be at the meeting, so we do know we will have quorum and we don't have to cancel the meeting if commissioners are making the trip to the airport.
All right, so we only have 2 minutes left on the meeting, unfortunately, so we do need to go into a vote. We can discuss further after maybe a couple meetings and see how it goes. But right now, the vote is between hybrid with a minimum requirement or virtual only option. So if we can have a vote, those in favor of the hybrid but with a requirement, say aye.
Aye.
Actually, you know what? I would like to table this and maybe have more discussion on the minimum requirement. Because, you know, if we have 2 commissioners that want to be in attendance in person, I think that they should have the option to do that. So I would like to table this if we could maybe have a vote for no minimum requirement, a minimum requirement, and a virtual only.
I second that.
I second
Thank
that.
you.
We can go ahead and
Thank you.
table this until the next meeting. The options for the vote, I think are up to staff. So we will discuss this as a group and we can come next meeting with the available options.
Okay. Thank you for that. All right. We are at the end of our agenda. Thank you, everyone. Do we have a meeting? Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Cal McCloy.
Thank you, sir. Do I hear a second?
Second, Commissioner Steiner.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor, unmute and say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.